why are we as a society making it easier for someone to die instead of trying to treat like the cause of the problem?
I think of science as like looking at the DNA of God. You know, like how things are working in this world is a derivative of how God has made these things.
If we're stressed or something, one nervous system will be activated, where if we're relaxed, like a different one will be.
UMass Dartmouth, I'll take my bioengineering degree. All right, so I guess we'll get started here. And we can just talk to each other. Sometimes I look at the camera, but you don't have to if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
That one.
Yeah,
okay.
Dan's gonna be gone.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you, Jill, for coming on. Appreciate you taking time out of your schedule.
Thank you for having me.
And I guess we've known each other now for a long time, 5-6 years.
Yeah, like 2019.
2019. So it's been a minute. Met here at UMass Dartmouth. Were you Novi?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's funny. Were you in the same Novus as Christina?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So funny. But yeah, it's been great knowing you. And now you just graduated again from your master's program.
Yes.
Yeah. How was that?
It was good. It was definitely something because I was in their 4+1 program. So bachelor's in bioengineering and then just continued for the master's in biomedical engineering.
Wow. So you're wicked smart now.
I hope so.
Cool. So I guess, and you're Catholic, which is great.
Yes.
I was wondering a little bit about like your background growing up. It sounds like you went to St. Dominic's.
Yes.
And like, I don't know, like what did you grow up going to CCD, faith formation, all that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So both my parents are Catholic. That's how they were raised. And I went to St. Dominic's Parish in Swansea and did the CCD program there. And as I got older, around like middle school, I think I was about 12, because when I was younger, like I went to church every week and went to CCD, but it was more kind of going through the motions. Like I was learning the lessons, but I wasn't like fully comprehending, I guess, as much. But then I started getting involved in the youth council that they had there with Deacon Frank, who's also deacon at UMass. Yeah. He ran that program.
Yep.
So it was helpful getting to talk to other students that were like middle school or even high school, and to get to do work in the church and help out. We would do things like help out at children's retreats and then help out. They have like a breakfast with Santa every year. Yeah. And do like food bag sortings and just do good volunteer work and also help out at family masses. Yeah.
Do you think that's something that is kind of the reason you kind of stuck with it, is because you had that hands-on ministry type work in middle school, high school?
Yes, definitely. It definitely gave me more of a sense of community in the church because there were students that I went to CCD with, but I didn't see them at Mass as much. It would mostly be people that my parents knew or some older people that I would see. But after forming that sense of community, it kind of made me think about things a little bit more. And then having Frank was great because when I went to college, then he was like, oh, I have this great program, like before college starts with Novus. At UMass Dartmouth. So.
Yeah. Did you go to CLI?
No, I didn't, which was upsetting to Frank. The times never lined up too well.
Oh, gotcha.
Because I danced at a local studio, so it was always the week of the recital.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I know that's where I first met Frank, was at CLI, and then that's how he pulled me to UMass Dartmouth, because I never heard of, like, I was a junior going into junior year, and I was starting to think about college, but I wasn't like entirely sure. But then he's like, oh, UMass Dartmouth, I'll write you a letter of recommendation. And I'm like, all right. And then it ended up happening. So it's probably Frank also that kind of pulled you towards UMass Dartmouth.
Yes.
I don't know if you applied to like any other colleges, but he is the reason I came to UMass, probably, other than engineering, which I liked, but.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's a big reason for me too. Like, I liked their bioengineering program, and I know I wanted to stay relatively close, and it also helped that Frank was here and he had a program.
Yeah, cool. So high school, you came to college, and then that's when you decided to do bioengineering.
Yes.
What kind of first got you interested in bioengineering? Was it like something you learned in high school or just something you did in your personal time?
Yeah, so I would always go back and forth when I was younger. I really liked science. I also kind of liked history, but I wasn't sure what to do with that.
Yeah.
But I believe it was my junior year in high school, I took an anatomy and physiology class, and I just got to learn more about the human body, how it works, all the different bones, muscle groups, the different organs, and how they work together. And I thought that was so fascinating. And also, if you can understand that, I feel like you are more able to help it. So if something's going wrong, you can understand, okay, like this is what's happening. And then you can go into a field where maybe you make medicine or you do something else that can help when certain diseases are present.
Yeah. I'm sure too, like doing all that ministry work, like helping other people kind of also reinforce that, like, oh, I want to help people. Like engineering, you know, there's different facets of engineering, even different facets of bioengineering. But, you know, one main streak is that you're trying to like make medicines and help people.
Yeah, especially since the human body, it's something we don't fully understand. Like unconsciously, our body knows what it's doing, like it knows how to function, but consciously we aren't aware of that. Like we don't know what's going on. Even with the human brain itself, we don't fully know what everything means. There was this cool thing I learned about where it was a bunch of different imaging, like CT scans or like MRI scans just in one on the brain, and they called it the glass brain, and you could see like while someone was doing something, different areas of the brain were lighting up, but no one really knew what it meant.
Yeah, you don't like feel your brain lighting up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
And so then, like during your time, you know, here at UMass, kind of where, like, what directed you and like into your current study and your interests? Kind of, how did you get aligned on that?
So I knew I wanted to go into bioengineering, so I started there, and then I remember it was a little bit different because I came in as a freshman, and then the spring semester we went home for COVID. So the classes there were just like regular engineering classes, though I wasn't too much into the bioengineering. There were a couple different classes I had to take on like just like the fundamentals
like
of
physics,
bioengineering, and like even engineering in general with physics.
Yeah, I was in physics with her.
Yes, we were.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just that, but I remember a club I was in was talking about the different research areas that professors had, and one with drug delivery and medicine came up. I think at the time it was creating, like, an artificial skin scaffold. If someone has, like, a wound or something, we could put something that's kind of like a Band-Aid, but it is able to administer drugs and help to, like, has properties to help heal the wound.
Oh, wow.
So
that kind
that's
of...
how I got into it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so let's, I mean, you have to talk about it because I don't think most people, I barely understood it, but your thesis for your master's, so what was the name of your thesis? What title?
So the title of it was Establishing a Method for the Genetic Manipulation of a Bacteria that I was using.
Yeah.
I won't say necessarily the name of it. I think my advisor's trying to publish some of the work.
Oh,
So
gotcha. Okay, yeah.
I won't get into too many specifics about that.
Yeah. No, but again, something wicked smart, something wicked, you know, interesting. And like we were talking before, it's such a different world that you're working in. And so let's talk about like this micro world for a second. Like, what have you found interesting about it? What have you like learned about it?
How cells behave is so interesting to me. Even I think my first like wow moments were when I was in the anatomy and physiology class, and we also talked about different organs that there were, and then how we could use like tissue engineering or something else to make artificial organs. And it's just everything is so complex, like it's hard for us to replicate what's already there. And then I also took a human organogenesis class that was about how basically how our bodies work and how they function with each other, and then also how like when babies are made, how they develop. And it's pretty baffling because you hear about that and there's so much that can just go wrong. Like it truly is a miracle that that is able to happen, like there are able to be like that we're here.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy because somehow it goes right, but we don't know how. It just does.
Yeah, and it's all like autonomous. It's all just happening without us knowing it, without us necessarily willing it. It's just something that, again, it's just like another world. It's just we don't fully understand it. We can kind of observe it and make some assumptions about it and test it and learn more about it. But I feel like microscopic, like how long has microscopic research been going on?
I'm not sure. I know that we have like more tools that are able to visualize it better, but I feel like I'm trying to think of when they first discovered DNA.
Oh.
I don't remember when that was.
I want to say it hasn't been, probably is not much past the 1800s. Like, I'm sure we've had microscopes since the 1800s, but like, have we been able to like study long term? And like, again, like you said, with the tools and, the technology that we have now, we're better able to like replicate, keep the scientific method, like research, what's the word? Keeping like your steps in order, making sure there's no like outside, like I'm sure they were just looking at it like a cell, but like, people like sneezing over here and like things could get like contaminated and stuff like that. So it's definitely a lot more locked down now. Yeah,
and then I think recently, since like the 70s or 80s, synthetic biology has been a push. Same with metabolic engineering, and that's just looking at these structures with like within ourselves and then within like even bacteria to see how they produce different products. Like how do we produce glucose, make energy and stuff like that, and figuring out how we can maybe manipulate that in order to help cure diseases, or in metabolic engineering is mostly bacteria, so to produce more of a product.
So I want to talk a little bit now for a couple of minutes about like merging your faith and science. And this is kind of like the meat and potatoes of this episode probably, because I feel like, and we were saying before, a lot of people think of faith and science as being at odds, but like the scientific method has only been around for a couple hundred years. Faith and religions have been around for thousands of years. And so how have you kind of meshed the two?
So when I was going about learning science, like from a young age, I never thought of it as like an adversary to my faith at all. I know there have been some instances in history, like maybe there was the debate, and I think that's why people think that, but it doesn't really go against it. If anything, they go hand in hand, especially with how cells work and how our bodies work, how we have, like how everything in nature happens, and then how we work as individuals. So especially as an engineer, like when you're working on engineering, you're designing products. Like there's always a maker. That's what engineers say. So when it comes to us, like there has to be a maker. Like I don't see how you can look at anatomy and how the body works and how babies are developing and not believe that there's a higher power, even if you don't believe, like in the same religion I do, you have to believe there is a God there that made us. Like this can't just all come to be.
Yeah. I mean, we look like in today's society, we look at like machines, buildings, architecture, the infrastructure, and we just say like, what great engineering, like what great design work, like how many man hours it's taken to like build these things. But then you look at a human body and you're just like, oh, that's just, it just is. But like if you, like you were saying, when you were in high school, you were understanding the different parts of the body, the anatomy, physiology, and seeing that this is like a machine. It's and it's, which is something you said before, it's like the best machine, because it's not like there's anything that's there that doesn't need to be. There's not anything that breaks over time. It's like, why, when I get hit, like my bone can take a lot of stress, but then if it breaks, it can also heal. Like what mechanical mechanism do we know that can self-heal? It's just crazy.
Right, and we were made to evolve over time as well, and we're able to like adapt to different scenarios. An interesting thing that I wanted to touch upon that I learned about was I was listening to a talk at a conference one time. I forget her name, but she was great. It was a professor at Yale, and she discussed, she was a chemical engineer talking about her role in environmental engineering, and her big push was creating products that are helpful for the environment, that can help us, because right now in our daily lives, like, we do expose ourselves to a lot of carcinogens.
Yeah.
And when we make things like medicine, what comes out of those pharmaceutical companies that create medicine is, they have a lot of drug development, but they also produce a lot of hazardous waste that can be harmful to us. An interesting thing that she brought up is, like, there are so many banned chemicals, but even in, like, babies who were just born, like, I think they did a study, I think it was 2010, where they found some of those, like, banned chemicals, like, in the umbilical cord. Like,
natural?
Not natural. I think it's because we're exposed to it ourselves.
I see. It's made its way into the umbilical cord. Gotcha.
So it's made its way into that. And one point that she touched upon was that something that causes this is our push for efficiency. Like, we're always trying to mass produce things. We're always trying to get things out on the market quick. So then she tried to discuss taking a look at a system that works efficiently but doesn't produce harmful things towards us. And the only answer that she had was nature. Like, nature is the only system that works and is efficient but takes its time to do that, and it doesn't harm us in any way. It somehow has it all figured out, and we try to replicate it. We have a whole field of biomimicry where we try to replicate what we see in nature, but we're not able to, at least right now. But it's something that we can't really, like, we can learn about it, but we can't really comprehend how to do it ourselves. Like, we don't have that ability.
Yeah. It's just crazy. And, like, I had the same thought, growing up about science and faith, and I never grew up thinking that, the scientific, discoveries and anything like that were at odds with God and creation and in this world. And I often try to explain to people who, may be asking of me, and I say, well, I think of science as, like, looking at the DNA of God. Like, how things are working in this world is a derivative of how God has made these things. Like, when you look at a car engine and you see, the engine block and you see machine marks, well, okay, this was machined by this type of machine, whether it was milling or CNC or whatever, and you're able to, like, look, like, just in that machine mark, you're able to see how the part was manufactured. When you look at, DNA or a cell, you're able to see, okay, why, and we were talking about this earlier, like, why is it working in a certain way? And I think, it's great to hear and know that, even somebody who's looking deep into this, microscopic world can say, no, there's nothing here that is at odds with faith, God, the story of creation. And in fact, it kind of helps prove that it's not just, and I said this earlier, it's like statistically it's impossible that all these autonomous functions, all of these efficiencies in nature would work all the time, and you can, prove it, basically.
Right. Nature is the most beneficial and most efficient system that we have, and it contains everything we need. Yeah. We're just trying to figure out how we can use that.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's just great because, and I guess there couldn't be an argument to say, like, we shouldn't be messing with nature, but God has given us this world, these the blueprints to to see, to look. And I think that if he didn't want us to looking at it, he would probably do like a Tower of Babel situation and be like, no, get away from this, get away from this thing. You're not supposed to see this. But he does want you to understand. Like, so you think some of the smartest people in the world are scientists, right? Not because they know how to, like, do math and stuff, but because they're understanding how the universe is unraveled. And I never claim to be this. I claim to usually be the dumbest person in the room because I like to listen to smart people. And if the smartest people are saying, like, no, the world, how the universe was created is not at odds with science. It's actually kind of, some of the smartest ones have said it's kind of shows a case for God or proof of God's existence, then I think, we should be listening to those people.
Yes. And like you were saying before, some people might have the argument that we shouldn't be messing with nature, but at the same time, he did give us this higher level thinking.
Yeah.
And he also gave us all the tools we need, or blueprints,
Mm-hmm.
as you were saying.
Yeah. So I know there probably is a level 2, that sort of thing. And I don't know if have you come across like certain areas of research where you're like, nah, like I guess I'm not really interested in that.
Yeah, it definitely gets tricky when you're talking about genetic manipulations, because there for sure is a line that should not be crossed. But where that line is usually up for debate. I know in many clubs and organizations I've been a part of, and even some classes, we discuss different ethical implications of maybe some of the work that's going on in the biotech industry. Like CRISPR-Cas9, it's a gene editing system. Basically, just like a brief overview on how it works, you have like a Cas9 enzyme, and if you want it, it can cut DNA. And so say maybe there's this piece of DNA that's causing like a gene to, or like a protein to produce something bad for the body.
Yeah.
So you can have this Cas9 enzyme come in and kind of cut that part out.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's definitely moral implications on when that should be used. Me, I think the technology is beneficial because I feel like helping people has always been like a big thing for me. When I got involved in the youth council when I was younger, I really liked doing food bag sortings and helping out with the kids, and just finding different ways to help people. And I feel like that's our role. Like as Catholics, we should be helping others. Because I forgot where I heard this, but I think it was one of like the group discussions we used to do at UMass, where we would watch a video, and there was one and like discuss it, and then one video discussed how we could see God through other people, and the interactions we have with people and how we help each other. So I feel like if that technology is out there and we know it can have the power to help people, then shouldn't we try to use it? But at the same time, I know that there's definitely a line that shouldn't be crossed, and if that technology is out there, who says someone won't cross it?
Yeah. I mean, earlier we were having a discussion about like kind of free will and how that plays out in our world, and how it was specifically how we reconcile with suffering. And I think it is a very, I don't know, like my mom says I'm very black and white, and I think the world, like, you should look at, and we were also talking about ultimate truths, like we should look at some things as black and white, but it does suck to have to be like, okay, well, this person is exhibiting these, XYZ symptoms or whatever it is, but like, at what point is it counter to God's, will for that person? And, maybe that, like we were saying, maybe that's more individualistic, rather than like society says, oh, anybody with this malfunction needs to get this treatment because it's bad. And because often I feel like society at large doesn't necessarily fully agree on the most moral of issues, if that makes sense. Like I feel like they usually just, and it comes from a place of wanting to help, like you said, but it often comes from like an ease, like what's easier, not more like what's the best.
Right. I remember there was this one discussion that we had that I definitely didn't agree with, but it was interesting to see what people thought. It's not something that's being implemented like now, but I think it was something that could be, and maybe like other countries were discussing it, but not the United States. It was, if people are suffering, like, is it okay for the doctors to give them, like, they called it like assisted suicide? And then it just made me think, like, why are we as a society making it easier for someone to die instead of trying to treat like the cause of the problem itself? It's just choosing something that might be like a little bit easier, and it might take longer to fix the cause of the problem, but fixing the symptoms will not solve anything without fixing the cause. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And like that kind of is in a parallel with what you just said about nature gets it right by doing it slow and right. And not like just trying to like push the solution right away and have all this, hazardous effects on the rest, like assisted suicide is a huge issue, in the church. And I think that argument comes from a place of, you see somebody suffering, you want to help them. But it's like, what is the implications of, taking someone's life just because they're suffering? We were just recording an episode about suffering, which is so funny. But it's like, is that, and I guess that comes into the moral issue, is like, is somebody's life less valuable because of the suffering? Which is like, I find that an easy question to answer, but I understand people are trying to be sympathetic and compassionate, but
yeah, it's definitely instances like that where I've seen there are definitely like moral issues on both sides,
right?
But it's not the science itself.
Yeah, it's like the science is what. How do I explain this? The discussion is the field that it's in, but it's not about that. It's about a larger philosophical issue almost.
Right. I feel like even with genetic manipulations, it's more like, what will people do with it once it's out there?
Yeah.
And as we were talking about before, we have nature to look to as like the system and how it works, because we are constantly trying to replicate that. And when we kind of deviate from that, I feel like is where we have the most issues. Like we were saying before, God gave us everything we needed, and he gave us like the understanding and the higher level thinking in order to figure out how to use it. Right.
I think that just reinforces my understanding of creation, because like, the reason I'm in solar engineering was because I wanted to get into renewables. The reason I wanted to get into renewables was because of, my care for the environment, and not in like, and I tell this not in a hippie way, like, oh, save the plants, but like, I feel like creation is something that's been gifted to us, something that was made by God, just like humans are made by God. We should protect humans. And so it's like, this earth is so valuable that we just have to take care of it. And it sounds like observing it at a scientific level, or using it in like a scientific purview, would be more in line with what God wants, because he doesn't want us to destroy the environment. He'd rather us use it in a way that doesn't compromise it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even metabolic engineering, I thought that was so interesting to me. That's just looking at the bacteria and just overexpressing certain genes in it. One thing was, have you heard of the Krebs cycle? It has a couple different names. It's like the energy cycle, so like how energy is produced inside of a cell.
Okay.
So it has like a bunch of different parts, and it's like a cyclical process.
Does any of it go through the mitochondria?
Not this one.
Oh, okay.
The mitochondria is important though.
Okay.
But anyway, you can overexpress or underexpress certain components inside of it. So if you want to create more of a certain product that can be helpful to us, you can do that. So like the different bacteria and the different naturally occurring organisms have the components that we need in order to create like renewable energy or biofuels. It requires some manipulation if we want to mass produce it, or
that makes sense, because like in I'm gonna forget what field this is, but like when I was learning about energy cycles, like from an engineering perspective, like there's always energy. Well, this is a physics thing too, but like or law of thermodynamics, energy is not created or destroyed; it's just transferred.
Right.
And so that makes sense. Like you're trying to unlock the part of it that's kind of blocked us out, and kind of optimize. Like if you lose, like let's say you're losing it to heat in the chemical reaction, how do you lower the heat so that more of that energy is staying in that product, so then you can use that for whatever other part of the cycle.
I apologize, I wasn't thinking the right thing before. That does happen in the mitochondria. You were right. I just had a second of had a moment there.
UMass Dartmouth, I'll take my bioengineering degree.
Yeah,
just kidding.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just this. And again, going back to like, it's such a different world. Like it's such, I feel like the problem with a lot of people today, and like why a lot of people aren't running towards Christianity and Catholicism, is because they're so in tune with what they can see and not with what they can't see. Like was it Jesus said to Timothy, like you have faith. You have faith only because you see, not because you believe. I think I'm getting that right. But when he wanted to like see the holes in his hands, like, oh, I won't believe until I see the hole in Jesus' hands. Well, if you have to see it, then is it really faith?
Right.
And it's like we don't see these microscopic or macroscopic parts of the universe, but that doesn't mean it's not there, and that doesn't mean that then doesn't have a philosophical effect on how we should live in that universe.
Right. And many people have that argument that they need to see it to believe it, and then that's when they compare it to science, like, oh, like this has been proven. But when you learn about physics, that's all a theory.
Yeah.
Like that's not, it hasn't been proven, but it hasn't been disproven.
Right.
That's just what we believe.
Yeah. It's just because you can, like, you drop a ball and you drop a ball again. Oh, I see it. There's gravity. I believe in gravity. But that doesn't mean that because there was also an astronomer who was mapping like asteroids or comets, and he was calculating like a gravitational force in some part of the galaxy, and he's like, yeah, there's supposed to be like something there. And I think that's how they discovered Pluto. Like, because he was able to like calculate the push and pull of the other planets on this spot, and he's like, okay, that's so there should be a planet there. Right.
And it is technically a theory, but you don't really see people questioning that.
Right. Yeah. So as a young person, looking at science, how, like, is it in the, like, for you, is it in the body that they should be looking to? Is it in something else, nature? Like, what would you suggest to look at as, like, to help them understand God?
Honestly, for me, it was looking at the human body. Mm-hmm. There's just so much that happens with it, and like our brain just knows how to do it, and it's not something we're consciously aware of. I don't know if that's to improve our efficiency, or maybe we're not able to cognitively like fully understand it.
Yeah.
But it's just so interesting because even just on a day-to-day basis, there's so many things that could go wrong but don't really.
Yeah.
And then even when I was learning about how babies develop, there's so much that could go wrong with that. Like that's kind of scary, but
right.
It doesn't. Like, we're all here. We're all proof of it.
Right.
And then looking at nature, how it survived this long, how it performs, just seeing that, to me, it's like, how can you not believe in God?
Yeah. It's like, I guess the two parts of the human experience are like the qualitative and the quantitative, like what you can see and then what you can measure. Mm-hmm. And like for me, like understanding creation as, being something done by God, I always, think of like looking at a sunset, like why does this sunset look so beautiful? Like, it's not something that is, it is chemical reactions that's affecting your mood, your brain, your waves and all that, but why? If it's something separate than myself, why is it having an effect on me? And then also, like, qualitatively, is that the numbers one?
I think it's
quantitative. Quantitative. I think it is quantitative. When you can measure, like, oh, this sunset is like exposing light at a certain frequency, which my eyes are registering at a different frequency than I register, like the gray wall. Like, why is that happening? And it's all part of like it's all part of how God has created things, and I find it as proof that God created us to be a part of this world, right? Yeah.
Right. And also with our emotions and everything, something that Michael actually brought up, which was really good, was that when we have like different parts of the nervous system, but there's research in those different parts help us feel like different emotions. Like if we're stressed or something, one nervous system will be activated, where if we're relaxed, like a different one will be. There's one that directly relates to the stomach. So based on what we put in our body. So if we eat something good, there might be more like good bacteria in our stomach that'll make us happier. And something that Michael pointed out was, oh, well, what happens when you have like the Eucharist, which it's something I never thought of, and honestly I'm gonna think about a little bit more moving forward. But I thought of it as when I go to church, and then afterwards you have a feeling of like, I want to say like relaxed and like happy, and you just feel lighter. And that's usually towards the end of Mass, like when you have the Eucharist. So I wonder if that plays a role.
I'm sure. I mean, so like the qualitative for me of that, of like receiving the Eucharist is, and I forget where I first heard it, but like when we like, why is the tabernacle at the center of the church? It's because that's where, you know, Jesus is inside of in the Eucharist. And, you know, we always, you know, genuflect, it's always at the top of the, you know, altar, and it's in a place of importance. And then after communion, that thing that's held in such high regard is then inside of us. And so we should be holding our bodies as in high regards because Jesus is now within us. So, and that's kind of like a qualitative way of thinking of the Eucharist. But now, you know, who knows, maybe you'll be the one to discover it. You know, when you're receiving the Eucharist, that, you said not a nervous system, is it?
Yeah, it's a nervous system.
A certain type of nervous system between your brain and your stomach. You know, maybe now when the Eucharist is breaking down like that, you know, and there are some Eucharistic miracles to back this up, like the DNA inside that Eucharist is like now being absorbed into yourself, and that's like a whole nother type of reaction in the body that we can't yet. I mean, I don't even know if we'll ever will, but understand how that's affecting, you know, our mood, our feeling. Like you said, I definitely think, you know, after communion, you have such like a grace bomb is going off. You're getting all these graces.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. It's probably just like something that's going to be a feeling. I don't know if we'll ever be able to quantify something like that.
Yeah, probably not the way we're headed.
No.
But it's cool to know that you could, you know, if there were billions of dollars, if the Vatican wants to sponsor you to do this research.
Right.
So, yeah, it's just crazy. Science.
It is.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Now, do you like, probably because that's like the industry you're in, but like, do you think of it as just like science, or do you think of it as like, I think of it like, because I don't know much about it, like I'll think about it as science, but like, have you come to think of it like in a different way?
That's a good one. I definitely, like, it's science, but it's also like how we're living.
Oh.
Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't think about it like strictly like, oh, like that's just science. I think maybe because I know so much about it, I'm constantly thinking, like, when I'm hearing things, like I can relate it back and be like, oh, like this might be because of this. Or even a kind of silly one is like when I'm like get nervous, and like, you know, when people get nervous about something, they start like MDing and you're like looking it up. I can stop myself and consciously be like, okay, like think logically, like, you know, like pretty well how the body works. Should I really be concerned right now?
Yeah, and I guess that goes back to like people thinking only of what they can see, and not like thinking beyond that, or maybe it's just understanding. I mean, people are smart. I feel like if they wanted to, they could, but again, it's just kind of like what's easier, what is like culturally going on, things like that. But yeah, so it's great. So now you've graduated, you're moving on. It sounds like you'll be doing. Can you say what you'll be doing?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, okay, yeah. Well, you'll be working for, you know, a good firm. Yeah. And doing good work, which is great. Now that you've kind of graduated, I know your research was kind of, well, it is specific. What are kind of your hopes? You know, you're a young Catholic with a bioengineering master's degree in a concentration in biomedical.
Yeah. So I definitely want to continue my field, the job that I have lined up. I get a little break in the middle, which is nice.
Oh, good.
And then towards the end of the summer, I'll start working in newer, like the place that I'm going, like the bioengineering department in it is like a little bit newer. So I'm excited to see where that takes me. And yeah, as for like me as an individual, usually I help teach CCD at St. Dominic's, so I'm excited to be continuing that. But yeah, exciting stuff coming up.
That's great because, I feel like something that the church has missed on is just brushing over these big issues. And I'm sure kids are going to have, like, CCD is younger kids, right? What grade do you teach?
Second grade.
Yeah, so it's not, like, insubstantial that, they're going to have, to us, maybe stupid questions. But, like, if you can explain it in a way and people can look at you, say, oh, well, she's a smart girl. She has the knowledge, the training, the degree to talk about these things. Maybe I should, not that it is a logical fallacy to it's a fallacy to believe somebody in, like, by their title, but you have, just from talking to you, I can see that you know what you're talking about. And so, especially for the youth, understanding that it's not, science is not divorce of faith, and in fact, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and eventually I do want to teach. I know the master's year this year, I got a scholarship where I was able to be, like, a TA for some classes, and just having the discussions. I did, like, a current topics in bioengineering class, and we would have different discussions and just talking to them and seeing where everybody's perspectives were at, like, in this new field. It's definitely more fulfilling, I feel like, to do that. So it's something I want to get back to at some point.
And I mean, as a Catholic and an agent for truth, like, you can, not to say, like, you have to, like, drill them on certain things, but, like, if your input may be key in changing their mind about how they're seeing the world, which could get them to heaven.
Yeah.
Crazy. Well, crazy connections, how things work, and one conversation can cascade into a conversion or reversion.
That's true. Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. Great. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It was great. You're so freaking smart. Everybody's gonna love this.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, so thank you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember if we asked her if she knows what it means.
I saw frog on the paper. It's like, fully rely on God.
Yeah. So the question to, cap the episode is, do you frog?
Okay. From that statement, I would say so. I mean, it's always, like, I feel like I always could do better. And definitely some days, especially when I had, like, long hours in the lab and I was, like, neglecting, like, more self-care aspects of myself, that started slipping as well.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a work in progress every day, and that still could continue to do better. And take, like, events like this or, like, retreats or discussions and stuff to help push that forward. Yeah.
Well, it's a lifelong process for everybody. And everybody who's come on has said a similar thing about, working on themselves, working on their prayer life, on their relationship, right, with God and Jesus. So you're not alone. We all are in that boat. But thank you again for coming on. Really appreciate it. And
thank you, guys.
We'll end in prayer. So in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Thank you, God, for this opportunity to speak with Jill, get her perspective, her witness, her research, her intuition on you and how you work in this world, in this environment. Thank you for this great conversation. Hopefully the viewers take a lot out of it. I want to ask you to continue to bless Jill and all she does and all she will do, keeping her close to you in your Sacred Heart, and to give her the strength in all that you need. So we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.